First of all, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. And we want to especially extend a very warm welcome, Baruchim Abayim, to the Kaplans for being here. Rabbi John Kaplan, who served as our interim rabbi and was so helpful and so gracious in the transition and was so helpful to me. And we're just delighted that you're here. And if there's any part of the service that you'd like to join in, you should feel free, but I'll also give you a day off, so to speak. But we're just delighted and very honored that you came here this evening. Thank you. We're ready to commence our service. I'm going to ask Amy and Jack if he would like to join. Oh, Priscilla, okay. To light the Shabbat candles. I will tell everyone that we're going to do a few things different in light of some of the constructive feedback that we've gotten. We may do a little more English than what is normal. We're just going to try some new things out this evening in light of some of the things that some people would like us to do. So we're going to begin on page 120.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Join in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik shel Shabbat.
Let us turn now to page 127. At the top of the page, there are days when we seek things. We join together in prayer. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, and day of peace. Please join in the singing of Hine Matov on page 128.
He
And we continue now with Shalom Aleichem on page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon. Mi melech Malchi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mi-melech Malachi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Nila Shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mi-melech Malchi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzidkem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon. Mi-melech Malchi Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Please rise now for the Baruch Hu on page 146.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated. Our service continues now on page 149. At the top of the page, please join in prayer. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, ha-ma'ariv aravim. And let us continue now on page 151. We join together at the top of the page, the prelude to the Shema. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Please rise now for the Shema on page 152. may be seated. And let us join with in a reading of the V'ahavta, page 155. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai your God. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem emet. And let us continue now with a prayer on page 157. Top of the page. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. We continue now on page 161, top of the page. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. This is a beautiful prayer that does not take for granted the very gift of life itself. And we ask God to spread the Sukkot, the sukkah of peace over all of us, over the world, over all of God's people, Israel, who are so devoted, and over Yerushalayim, the eternal Jerusalem that is the meeting place between God and humankind. We continue now with the Vishamru on page 162.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Beini uvein bnei Yisrael, oti le'olam. Beini uvein bnei Yisrael, oti le'olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz וביום השביעי שבת, שבת בינפר. בין היא ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. בין היא ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם, ברית עולם, ברית עולם.
Our service continues now with the tefillah. Please rise. Begins on page 164 and then continues on page 166.
Adonai, sefer tzeit yiftach, ufia gita yiratecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Page 166.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu v'Imoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Hagel, Hagadol, Hagibor v'Nahara, Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Geulah לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ויצרת שרם. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מקלקל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומציל אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך אמת ומחייך, ומצליח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We remain standing. Let us turn to page 173 at the top of the page before we begin our silent meditations. Let us join together. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle to find rest on this day, may all who suffer find solace, may all who hurt find healing on this day, may all who despair find purpose, may all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, who sanctifies the Sabbath. And we continue in silent devotion, silent meditation through page 180. Together, top of page 179, prayer for peace that concludes the silent Amidah, that concludes the Tefillah portion of our service. Together, grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivorech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. We continue now with the Shalom Rav on page 178.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki Atahu Melech Adon Lekol HaShalom. Ki Atahu Tasim leolam, Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha, Tasim leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech tasim le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha, tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam. Tasim le'olam.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. And as I said before, we want to welcome the Kaplans back to our community. You really have never left us in terms of our hearts. And when you came back, it really just, I think everyone felt just this tremendous warmth and deep appreciation for everything that you did during this time of transition. Thank you. Lech lecha, literally go for yourself. For your benefit is this week's Torah portion. It is one spiritual journey, something inside the heart that defies logic, rationality, and yet we know it is true for self-growth to occur. I want to begin with a famous poem most everyone here has heard of at one time or another in one's education, that touches deeply upon the nature of self-difference of self, that is to say, different from the environment in which one is accustomed. You'll recognize it as soon as I recite the first line. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. A poem by Robert Frost. Abraham, still known as Avraham, is told by God at the outset, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'me'moladetecha u'mibeit avicha hel ha'aretz asher ra'eka v'yasecha legoy gadol v'avarcheka v'yagadla shmecha v'chyei bracha. Go for yourself from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. It seems almost immediately after Abraham adheres to this voice of God, becomes difficult. There's a famine, and he must travel out of this promised land to feed his family. He feels forced to misrepresent Sarah, his wife, to a foreign king out of fear for his life. His family life becomes increasingly difficult when Sarah allows Hagar, her handmaiden, to act as a surrogate mother, giving birth to Ishmael, who's later banished from the home. Many of us, under such circumstances, would turn back from such a promise and return to a land of material, psychological, emotional, and even one could say spiritual comfort to do what one is familiar with. Throughout his life, though, Abraham persists in his singular faith in an incomparable, an incomprehensible God, a God whom he confronts repeatedly in opposite of the Middle East practice of idolatry. Indeed, Abraham and Sarah have traveled this road, capital R, this road not taken. Why did Abraham and Sarah leave their homeland, their community, at an age where all of us would feel stability and security as being important? Our sages comment that you cannot be devoted to God, to grow in this aspect of your spirituality, if your environment is filled with idolatry. As a footnote, this is not in my sermon. You can't practice Judaism without a temple. You need a Jewish place to go and to be Jewish. Environment makes a difference, and sometimes you must leave that environment to risk so much to have spiritual growth. Indeed, in our society, as it was in Abraham's time, a road rarely traversed. Self-growth requires sacrifice, and it means leaving so many things behind to encounter the new inner self. The Torah is a rich history of such journeys. Noah's voyage was not of his choosing, and we learned something last week about human nature and what can happen when exposed to trauma and our response to when we numb ourselves in its aftermath. This past week in Torah study, we learned of Adam's and Eve's partaking of their tree of knowledge of good and evil that they were forbidden to do. Typically, we understand this story on the level of our human nature to violate commandments, to violate laws, and that Adam and Eve's behavior was sinful. But there's another way in which to frame this narrative, and it is one of human curiosity. Eve ate from the apple because she was in part curious and acted on her desire to try something different. And she gained something extraordinary, an inherent sense of what is right and wrong, of what is good and evil. Eve shares this with Adam, and their lives are forever changed. There are consequences, one of which was to begin a new journey away from the Garden of Eden, idyllic paradise, as it were, and live a life that all of us can connect to and identify with. Had they remained in the garden, had they never ate the apple, what would that story mean to us today? The world that they inherit and explore is much like our world. Work, procreation, family, strife. These were their struggles, in many ways the same struggles in life that we have. The banishment from the Garden of Eden began a human journey that continues to this day. Carl Rogers, the noted American psychologist, theorized that each individual had within themselves the potential to achieve self-actualization, to be the person that they were born to be, and that one such goal of therapy was to help the individual create their own path towards that endeavor. The road not taken are the stories of the biblical narratives of our ancestors. And I believe that one lesson is that if we are to grow, then we must give up something. We must sacrifice. We must be willing to take risks that will undoubtedly create existential anxiety. A person must be willing to risk a great deal to grow, and the sacrifice can be enormous. And I will tell you this as a rabbi for well over 2 decades. I've been privileged to witness such courage in many congregants with whom I've had the privilege to work with over my many years in the rabbinate. But the phenomena of risk, sacrifice, and anxiety in order to grow, when we create a pathway toward self-actualization, applies to congregations as well. A congregation, we must be willing to take risks in the spirit of Abraham and Sarah. And when we sacrifice, we will feel anxiety. We will extend ourselves in ways that at one time might have been unthinkable, whether individually or as a congregational family. When we look back on the road that we did take, the one less traveled, we may fully realize, as Robert Frost concludes, that that road that we traveled has made all the difference. Amen. We continue with May the Words, page 180.
Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, Adonai, my rock and my Redeemer. My rock and my Redeemer.
We're going to change the order just a little bit of the service this evening. We're going to change the order of the service just a little bit this evening. We're now going to continue now with the Kiddush, which is in the beginning. I think it's page 122, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, actually page 123. Look at the music and hold the cup at the same time. I have to do things. Anybody would like to come and hold it? Otherwise, we'll just put it down. Thank you, Ben. Please.
Good for standing and holding.
That's all you have to do, I promise.
You'll be intrigued by our duet version of it.
We owe some of this to Rabbi Kaplan because he left us with a lot of music that we were just kind of looking through the sheet music, and all of a sudden I saw a Kiddush that was written by Kurt Weill. Yes, you know it. Oh. Well, we'll dedicate it to you. I won't put you on the spot to come up and sing it. Unless you'd like to come, though. We can do it together if you'd like. I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay. But just know that this gentleman can do it very well. But thank you for leading the music. Thank you. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kadsha me'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom techilah lemikrai kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'charta Yotanu kidashto mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
You get to.
Passing this month, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our service continues now with the Mishaberach prayer, page 371.
Please join in.
Mishaberach avoteinu mikol habraka leimoteinu. May the source of strength
Rhoda Bennett, Paul Bradley, Harold Fink, Charmaine Mosier, Bruce Mosier, Mark Schoenfeld, and Mark Siegel. I'll now ask the people on Zoom to unmute themselves and recite the names of those in need of healing.
Now, Hadassah Buckman, I don't think so. I don't think
Sure.
Haya Udinsky.
Alice Glass.
Yeah, sick.
Hmm.
I was sick.
Oh, is that what this? Oh, is that what they said? I don't know.
You can say it again, Emily.
I said, my name won't sound like him.
Now turn to the congregation. Just as my eyes meet yours, say the names of those in need of healing. Thank you. Robert Recusin.
Please join. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Please rise for the Alenu, page 586. You may be seated. We mourn the passing of Lawrence Joseph LeMay, the father of Anne Zelniker. This week, we observe the yahrzeits of Sam Sokol, Paul Paper, Boris Resnick, Nancy Goldberg, Yetta Shoichet, Meyer Weinstein. Is there anyone observing a yahrzeit who they wish to remember at this time? We turn now to the people on Zoom. In solemn testimony to that unbroken faith which links the generations one to another, let all of us rise and join in the recitation of the Kaddish, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, bi'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam u'lalmei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha perichu. V'yela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May God, who established peace unto the heavens, grant peace and comfort in the hearts of all who mourn, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. We have a number of birthdays this past week. Daniel Fetterman, Robin Mayer, Minnie Skinner, Nell Ennis, Saul Brown, and today is the birthday of Jennifer Sussman. This past week, there are no anniversaries, but next week there'll be a few. So we want to wish all of them a very happy birthday. And anyone else observing a birthday whose name we didn't announce from the Bima? Anyone here this past week? Let's see, there is a tour study next week at 5:30, and as well as a services next week at 6:15. I believe, yeah, I think that's all the public announcements we have for tonight. Okay. We're going to conclude our service because this is the portion of Lech Lecha. Debbie Friedman wrote a song called Lichi Lach, which is a song about Abraham's journey, about all of our journey, and that can be found on page 341. Please join with us. Oh, and before we do that, how come someone didn't remind me? Thank you. Please join in with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. I was told by my mother, never sing with food in your mouth. Is that one of the things that you learn in the...
Yeah, they teach you that too.
Go a little higher for you?
I think you got to take the lead, so you have to finish your let's see.
Do we need a caper for this in D? I don't remember. I think that's good for you.
Yeah, that's Lechila to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha to a place you do not know. Lechila on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lechila. Lechilach, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechilach, to a place that I will show you. L'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim lechacha. And you shall be a blessing. Lechila.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
We want to make sure that we acknowledge all who came online today as part of our community. We wanted to thank Steve Malfelder, Harold and Emily Fink, Leonard Wells, Jonathan Fratkin, Harvey Gandler, Phyllis Feibelman, Maud, Diane Frank, Richard Frank, Shirley, Marion Birkin, Bailey Myers, Milton and Margaret Brown. We welcome you and we thank you as well as everyone for coming this evening for services. Shabbat Shalom.